remember Benchmark being quite different from the elementary school that I left before I went to Benchmark. The beginning process of how they assess what your needs are and what brought you to Benchmark in the first place, I'll never forget that, because it felt like finally someone was listening.
In the 80s, a lot of research began to be developed around ADHD and some of the medications. We were beginning to know that there was more to the way children approached learning.
I think research has always been a really, really big piece of Benchmark and really important to Irene from the day she started the school. Some of the things I remember are coming up to Irene's office and having research seminars.
We would just come in and sit around the table and think about how that research would translate into the classrooms at Benchmark. That's the trick of not only understanding what good practices are, but then how do you actually integrate it in a classroom in a way that is sustainable and that really benefits the students.
Original members of the Family Services Organization helped Irene Gaskins put together this formula that essentially said that the student is not just a student. The student is part of a system, and the system includes their family, their teacher, and the classroom. And as psychologists, we approached that whole experience as one that there were multiple opportunities to support the child.
When I interviewed, I think the thing that was most impressive to me was the fact that Irene was doing things very differently than other traditional schools working with this population were doing. She had really delved into the temperament literature. And I thought that that was both wise and courageous of her, and it really did lend itself to working with our students.
We knew this from the 70s, but when we looked at strategy instruction across the curriculum, there were things we were teaching really well in language arts, in reading and in writing. We immersed ourselves in following this very closely, and we suddenly realized in science class, it didn't appear that they had these strategies. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to reteach these strategies in all subjects across the curriculum, that the children aren't really owning them. And the good news was, no, we didn't have to reteach them, we only had to cue and coach them. But it pushed us to look at what the instruction was about.
And I think from watching the students approach a task, it really gave us a lot of insight into what was going on in their heads when they were assigned a task. And so it helped us to understand that we had to give better, more complete directions at the beginning of a task, that we needed to break it down and guide them through the task.
One of the things that Benchmark taught me was that there's a rule book out there that you can't read, but don't worry about that. You have other skills and other strengths, and you're gonna figure out how to come to the same solution and come to the same educational goals. That students that are in your class actually can read that rule book, that understand that rule book. That rule book makes complete sense to them, the A to B to C, whereas I happen to maybe go A, F, P, D, G, X, but I'll still get to Z. The comfort, the understanding that not every brain has the same process. And the goal was to find my process. And they helped me find the way I could learn, the way I could translate that rule book that might as well be written in Greek, that I could not follow, that I could not understand, and it was not making sense to me. No matter how many times they repeated it, my brain didn't work like that.
In the summer of 1985, we would teach the two classes like any other summer program teacher in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we watched our supervisor, Becky Hemphill, teach a summer language arts class of her own so we could observe a master teacher at work.
I know when I taught in the summer program that I loved it because it was so well-defined, and the children who thought they were just going to camp and were coming in for reading and writing loved it too, and sometimes their first experience with success in school, and it was always just really wonderful to see that almost without fail they would be leaving happy and feeling like they could read and like they could write.
The summer rec program, which I think is one of the finest things we do at Benchmark. The first summer I did it, Rick Gaskins was my one assistant, and a friend of his was my other assistant. It was the three of us with no gym, no athletic field, 15 students, and we basically did whatever we could to entertain them for as long as we could. The one thing I said is, if you want me to go full day, I need a swimming pool. And they said, you need to prove to us that you can run a summer camp and it can be effective. And I knew I had made it when that above ground James pool turned into an in-ground Carlton pool, 25 by 50 feet. I felt like I had proven myself, and now we had a real summer camp. Benchmark Summer Camp has got magic like no other summer camp could possibly have. It is a place where children get to learn, they get to play, they get to make friends, and they leave here with confidence that they never thought they could have.
One very, very popular aspect of the Benchmark Summer Recreation Program was the Outward Bound course. The most popular part was the famous zip line. I remember standing in the forest thinking, I'm not going to do this. But then realizing that there were all these kids around me giving me a boost of confidence, and I'll never forget the feeling of jumping off that platform and having the kids cheering, and it was a great personal moment, but it also kind of underscored the whole purpose of the Outward Bound course.
I would go to all these conferences, and researchers and educators then came to look at Benchmark and see what was going on. And I had the audacity to apply for a James S. McDonnell grant. And I was the last person interviewed, and I was really offended by that. But actually, they scheduled me last so they could talk with me about all the ideas the other researchers had presented. And they somehow figured out that Benchmark would be the ideal place where they would make these people who were going to get grants of $1 million, make them work with Benchmark to try out their ideas. We had McDonnell grants for 6 years to work with the top researchers in the country. I'd have done it for free.
The first grant was strategy instruction, basically in language arts. It started with metacognition, and it was helping students understand how they learned and how to use what they learned for their success. These people Irene hired went into classrooms. We spotlighted certain students and we assisted them in their work and in helping them acquire the process and conceptual skills that they needed to be successful.
We would have the children sit in a room, and we were all assigned certain students, and we would give them a task and then watch how they approached the task. But it gave us a lot of information about how they were approaching their learning, and it was quite an honor for the school because we were the only elementary school to receive the grant. It was mostly to colleges.
We became very well known nationally and internationally. People would come to visit because of the McDonnell grant, because we were able to put into practice this research that we were so fortunate to be able to be part of.
After 2 years in the lower school, I moved into our middle school age, and again, there was no middle school as such. We had a couple of older classes, and really at that point in time, students were looking to get out. At our middle school age, kids needed something different.
The middle school started in, I think it was 86 or 87. Up until then, they had been treated just like the elementary students. It was a self-contained classroom. They did the same kinds of things. And Linda Six and Eric McDonnell had the vision to move to more of a middle school model where the children were changing classes for some things, where there were a variety of teachers that they would have to get used to. We continued to add things that were more appropriate for their age, that interested them, and began to see a real definite shift in their feelings about themselves, as they were treated more appropriately for their age. We started dances, we had a student council, the play grew out of the middle school format. We like to expose them to many different things so that they can try things that they may not even know exist and find those interests where they can feel good about themselves and really feel like they've accomplished something.